On behalf of Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom and Care, we would like to welcome you to our series dedicated to those countries suffering humanitarian crises that didn't get the media attention they should have received, viewing the scale of humanitarian challenges. And so Breaking the Silence today is covering Zimbabwe. A country, 60 million people in dire need of help and assistance. We are talking food insecurity, partly and mostly caused by climate change, which have been provoking floods, cyclones and droughts. We still are in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, who has left the country in a real food crisis situation. So we are talking 30 to 38% of rural population is food insecure, according to a statistics of the World Bank made in August 2022. In addition to humanitarian aspects we are going to highlight in the course of our discussion, obviously, we have a political regime that is challenging its critics by imposing draconian laws to suppress opposition and thus restricting democratic and civic space. So it is a worrying development which we are going to analyze in the course of our discussion with our esteemed panelists, who I'm going to introduce to you very soon. But before we are doing that, we are going to have a look into two charts we prepared for you to give you a better grip of what Zimbabwe is about, because not each and everyone has a deep, intimate knowledge of the country we're going to examine today. Zimbabwe, as we said, almost 60 million people. Looking at the Human Development Index, it is ranked 113 out of 132. So this is in itself a statement. It is pretty low and worrisome. In terms of gender inequality, it is ranked 50 out of 146, which is not that bad. We have seen other examples much higher. So this is not that worrisome, but we are going to address more aspects in the second slide. Let's see, there we have it. We have currently we have about 7 million people in need of humanitarian aid. We've got 50% of the population living in extreme poverty, and it is the most vulnerable, affected most. 74,000 children are acutely malnourished. So this will be an aspect we're going to address in the course of our discussion. And saying that, I'm very happy to introduce our panelists today to you. And I would like to start with Chikondi Chabvuta. She is representative of CARE, and she knows firsthand how the humanitarian situation in Zimbabwe is right now. So we are very happy to have you. You're the latest edition of this panel. So thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you. Welcome, Chikondi. I continue with Fungisai Sitole. She is program manager of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation in Harare. Her background is democracy and governance expert. and she has more than 15 years of expertise in this area. And Fungisai had been with us last year too. The series then was called Suffering in Silence. We rebranded it, Breaking the Silence, and we know Fungisai is giving us a world-class analysis of what is going on in Zimbabwe when it comes to the civic and political aspect and sphere. Thank you very much for being with us, Fungisai.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Last but not least, there is Barbara Gröblinghoff. She is program director, country director, South Africa and Zimbabwe, and she's based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And obviously, she has been living in the region for decades. It is decades, right, Barbara? Yeah. So we are very looking forward to get your insights when we are coming to analyze Zimbabwe's situation right now. Welcome, Barbara. Lovely to have you. To all of you in the audience, we would like to invite you to just give us your comments, your questions in the Q&A section you find below the screen. You can do it in English, in German, in French, in Spanish, whatever. One of these languages would be great to just give it to our panelists. Please feel free to direct them to us. And with this said, we are going to start our discussion. Chikonde, you are the care person on the ground. Just give us an idea of how acute the humanitarian challenges are right now.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here. As it has been said, the current situation in Zimbabwe, we do have a cholera outbreak where about 470 suspected cases with 104 confirmed cases. As of now, there are response works going, but there are confirmed 17 identified hotspots within Zimbabwe of the cholera outbreak. On top of that, we have had storms and flooding, and we also had Cyclone Freddy, which did hit parts of Zimbabwe, though the impact was not as significant. But as these were all happening and are happening, we still have a population that is food insecure, currently estimated around 1.8 million people that are food insecure. So that's the situation as it is now. As CARE, we have response work for the cholera, but also we're working with the structures on the ground on the flood response. But on the food insecurity that we are dragging also from the 2021 report, we still do not have any support to respond to that. Thank you.
And adding to this scenario, obviously there's water crisis too, right? I researched and read that even in Harare, it is not granted. You cannot take it for granted to get access to safe water, is it?
That is true, and I think that is why also we have, a rising case of cholera that is emanating from having no access to quality water, no access to water, and also issues of sanitation on top of the climatic impacts that are linked to that.
What is in your list of activities? What is the foremost and most important assistance program you're rolling out right now?
The cholera response is one of the biggest that we are currently rolling out. Apart from that, we also have the response to the flooding and the storm that did take place. There were some schools that had roofs blown away during the Cyclone Freddy that hit Southern Africa. So we also have some response work that we are doing within the structures of civil protection committees. So those are just the highlights. And we have pushed for support to work on the food insecurity. But since it is not getting the needed media attention right now, but also with all the issues that are happening within Southern Africa, I think we are having those challenges to get the needed visibility and then the needed funding to respond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why we are doing what we are doing, right? To just shed light on underreported countries. Exactly. Fungisai, what's the government's response to this humanitarian crisis? I mean, it's not a new crisis. Cholera obviously is, but it is an underlying topic. I mean, how has the government reacted to?
At least the government has been, at least I would say, quite active in its response, encouraging people to really work on sanitation and making sure that they are clean and they have water and they have soap to clean themselves up. But and they also produce every day, the situational analysis of the cholera situation. They are really tracking and following it up closely. But well, it is just that. For me, the fact that at this day and age, we are still struggling with diseases such as, I would consider them to be really near obsolete diseases such as cholera here, it's a reflection of our own struggles as a country in terms of putting our people first. Mm. I think in terms of the strategy, in terms of the planning, I think a wheel fell off somewhere, and we no longer really consider things that are key for our own people. Yeah. Hence, I will be quick to conclude that, most of these challenges that we face, most of these crises that you talk about are also self-imposed in a way. There are things that we could have done as a country to correct this. As we speak today, our healthcare system has literally collapsed.
Yeah.
You will go there, you will find no help. Yeah. Not only because of the exodus, the massive exodus of our health personnel leaving the country, but also the lack of the political will to actually put in deliberate and well-calculated measures to make sure that our healthcare system is operational. Mm. So I really, the response is there, the statistics are there, but I think the political will is just not there at all. I don't know, Barbara, if you have anything to also add there.
I'm sure Barbara has, especially in view of human rights violations and restrictions of civic and political space, right, Barbara? This is your day-to-day concern when it comes to Zimbabwe, right?
It is the day-to-day concern, but I think we need to go slightly back. I was slightly amused, not in a sort of ha-ha funny way, that you said that food insecurity in Zimbabwe is mainly caused by climate change. I would like to underline what Fungisai said here, and that is that it's the government that has made this country so enormously vulnerable to climate change. And it's sort of left hook, right hook. The left hook that the government gave the country a number of years ago was that it effectively did away with property rights, particularly in the rural areas, and food production collapsed. Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket for all of Southern Africa. Now it's the basket case. And that was done through bad, greedy, and very self-serving politicians, most of whom are still in government. Mm-hmm. And then you have these extraordinary, effects of climate change. Chikondi referred to Cyclone Freddy. I would just like to explain to you what happened there. So Cyclone Freddy started in Australia. That's far away from us, right? Cyclone Freddy started in Australia. It came the whole of the Indian Ocean over to our side here in southern and eastern Africa, caused absolute havoc, particularly in Mozambique, but also in Zimbabwe, also in South Africa, and Malawi as well. It then went back to Australia and then came back to us. Cyclone Freddy was busy for over 30 days. It is the longest, harshest, worst cyclone ever recorded in history. So now you layer these kind of these kind of climate change problems on top of a system that's already not working.
Yeah.
And that is what's bringing the house down. I mean, as Fungi Sai said, cholera is the result of the collapse of the water and sanitation infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not because people are doing silly things. It's not, that's not what it is. It's those are political failures.
Yeah, and so thank you very much, Barbara. Chikondi, I mean, you in your position as carer, you can only do so much. I mean, there is a limitation of funds of people, but I mean, what is the spirit on the ground? I mean, how are people reacting when you offer help, or what is the spirit? Give us an idea of how are people facing these never-ending challenges to survive and to make good on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, Brita, I like the word that you use, survival. Yeah, it is about survival at this moment. And it is like a frustration for the people that there are these growing needs. And in a country, as has been said, that used to be a breadbasket. This is a country that was rich and has a lot of resources, but they are constantly met with this climatic crisis. So there is frustration and there is a concern when organizations like ourselves and our colleagues are in place, but they are unable to meet the demand, but then they are also unable to respond. So that is also, I think, an issue that not only for the communities, but us in the development in the humanitarian sector, we are aware of, and it really breeds a lot of frustration, doubt, but also the issue of prioritization. This is an issue. These are people that require the same assistance as other countries that are receiving probably attention. So, where is the rating? Who decides who gets attention and who decides where the funding goes? Because at this point, it is about ensuring that there's response to the human suffering that is being experienced. And then, it's not affordable for most people, as it's been said. So we really need to see how we can put in measures to adapt to climate change, avert the catastrophes that are being created, but also have a new system and a more resilient system that works for Zimbabwe, for Africa, to really make sure we are not in this constant cycle of food insecurity.
Yeah, and I know the keyword empowerment is so dear to your heart and the CARE's mission, empowerment. But if you are faced with people who are put in a position where you have to beg to survive, I mean, it's so there's a dualism, right? I mean, how can you terminate that? I mean, is there a solution for the future? I mean, I know you've got youth programs, and obviously youth is a strategic leverage for Zimbabweans' future, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I think the most important thing to realize is that empowerment efforts or efforts to adapt, to respond, do require funding, and that funding needs to be made available, but that can only be done if there's a certain level of public awareness to increase the budgetary support that goes into response work. So I would say that it is important for us as an organization that we work on these models that have been proven to take people out of this context, but they can only be fully realized if there is funding attached to them, or if not external funding, at least then the government is taking them on board and adapting them on the ground. The context that we are operating and we are responding to, such as the cholera, you can see the change. You can see also the amount of work that's going in there. So people are already on the ground to move out of this, but what is needed is the will from sources to ensure that this does materialize.
And this sense of frustration which you're expressing. When I started our talk before we went live with Fungisai, and I wanted to compliment Fungisai on the Independence Day. Today is Independence Day, Zimbabwe. So it is somehow celebrating 43 years since Zimbabwe became independent from United Kingdom. And when I wanted to compliment you, you said, I don't feel like celebration. Why is that, Fungisai? Give me an idea. Why you are not in the mood of celebration?
I would quickly say that independence for me is not only the issues around sovereignty that we talk about. It also just boils down to the individual as well. The feeling of being independent, the feeling of being free. And for us, we might be free from a colonial, shackles, or under the British rule under the British rule. But at the moment, I wouldn't consider myself to be free, and I think many Zimbabweans do not even feel that freedom at all. Instead, Zimbabwe itself, post-independence, has continued to degenerate, get worse, and everything continues to fall apart. I spoke earlier of the healthcare system. The education system, which used to be one of the best in sub-Saharan Africa, has literally collapsed. And you have Zimbabweans looking for education everywhere else, not in their own country. You talk of water crisis. Many Zimbabweans go for weeks in the city of Harare without water. Electricity, I will not dare get into that. You go for days as well without electricity. Jobs, we're talking of an unemployment rate of more than 90%. Then we talk of how the government has cracked down on all those with dissenting voices, on all those who choose to speak out, on those who seek to hold the government to account. All of those are punished for that. So that is why I'm saying that it is difficult to celebrate being free when you are not free. It remains sort of a window dressing that we are free, yet we are not really free. That's the feeling that I really have. And just to also pick on to what Chikondi said, that they've struggled to get support to address the food insecurity in Zimbabwe. Again, I'll say that we always shoot ourselves in the foot. Zimbabwe has been pushing for the Private Voluntary Organizations Act, which means organizations even like CARE would struggle to do the work that they're supposed to do and save the livelihoods of all those poor, marginalized, and vulnerable communities. There's been confusion in the civil society sector, including the international intergovernmental organizations as well. There's been confusion on how to proceed. So how do people support us when we put spanners in our own systems that make it impossible for people to help us? And who suffers at the end of the day is the ordinary Zimbabwean, is the poor person here in Zimbabwe. And coupled with that, I guess you have also followed the Al Jazeera documentary on the gold mafia and focusing also on Zimbabwe as well. And you see at all the resources that are being shipped out, no one accountable. And no one even then takes a dime and puts it into our healthcare system. So you ask yourself that, yes, there is climate change. Yes, there are all these other factors, but also I think the greatest failure has been our government. It has really failed us. It has failed to support us as its own people. And that is why you see the region will also continue to also feel the pressure. We as Zimbabweans, we keep on moving to South Africa, making it impossible for the region actually itself to even further develop, because we are also putting pressures elsewhere, not only at home, but we also go out in a search for greener pastures. And I feel that there is no reason to celebrate at all. Thank you.
Yeah, we get it. We really get it. Thank you very much, Fungisai. Barbara, Fungisai was referring to the proposed Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill. Complicated word, simply put, gag order, right? It's a gag order for charities and NGOs, isn't it?
Well, it's worse than that. I mean, what it basically does is, and I mean, we have other examples in Russia and other authoritarian countries, is that they're really, the government is fighting on two fronts here. They try and shut down all political activity. Fungisai has referred to that on a number of occasions. And they have now opened, if you so like, a second front, and Chikondi's organization would absolutely fall under that as well. And that is anything to do with civil society. So if they don't control it, they don't want it. And this particular legislation goes so far that the responsible minister can replace the entire management of an organization, their board, attach their assets, their bank accounts, everything else. I mean, basically, yeah, shut them down completely.
And Chikondi, how can you as an organization bypass this proposed bill? It is not yet passed or agreed by the president yet, but I mean, if it comes to life, what would that mean on for your daily work? I mean, could you still work independently?
Yeah, so that's going to be a tough call, because we are working with women in, we're trying to work with women, adolescent girls, and work with government, complement government efforts in trying to respond to humanitarian crisis. So with such a law, if it does see the light of day, there are those, there are those accountabilities that then fall through the cracks. There are those, expectations that go unmet, and then just breeding more frustration and more concern. And as Fungisai said, that creating the pressure in country and that internal instability for people of Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Talking about Zimbabwe, I mean, the name of Dzidzi Dangarengba is obviously a name that has a certain resonation all over the world. And I mean, I know, Barbara, you have been part of you had been an observer during the process, right? Could you just fill us in for those who might not have followed the case? How does it stand right now?
So Dzidzi Dangarengba, for the German among the listeners, she won the, help me here, Fungisai, it was the 2020 or the 2021 prize of the Deutsche Friedenspreis des Deutschen Buchhandels. And she was the first Black woman author who wrote in English in the 80s already. And, she was a finalist this year for the book. She was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. And, she's really quite an extraordinary literary talent. And she and a friend, Julie Barnes, during COVID, went out with signs, and the signs basically read that they wanted a better Zimbabwe. They asked for certain people who had been detained without trial to be released, and one was that they wanted better institutions. The women were both arrested on COVID, on COVID regulations, which then morphed into all sorts of other things. Cut a long story short, they were in and out of trial, in and out of incarceration for more than 2 years, and were finally at the end of last year found guilty. And the punishment, so-called, was such that it would they didn't have to go to jail. They could buy their way out, but it would basically prevent both of them from giving any comment or doing any kind of work in a journalistic, writing, creative capacity in Zimbabwe. The women are going on appeal. And the appeal is being heard on the 8th of May, and Fungisai will be there as an observer. And what Fungisai and I we shared the observing, and Fungisai would then feed all the information into all the English media, and I would do the German bit. that's how we did it. Fungisa, is there anything that I've left out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we might add that there is, because of the German connections Zizi has, Sabine Leuthäuser-Schnarrenberger was visiting. We might add that she is a board member of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation, and in this and obviously a politician and committed to human rights. And she attended the court together with you, Barbara and Fungisai. And Barbara, when we prepared this talk, you were describing how you prepared this visit, because there was let's say you had a very challenging scenario in your head, which might have happened to a VIP politician such as Leuthäuser-Schnarrenberger. What was it?
Yes, so well, the person who's got far more experience there is Fungisai, but we basically, between the two of us and our finance woman, got together and over a period of time took quite a lot of cash out of the bank and deposited it at the office, several thousand US$, because we thought that if Leuthäuser-Schnarrenberger gets arrested, we need to be able to post bail and do that very quickly. Fungisai and I only told Sabine about this when we took her back to the airport to fly back to Germany. So we tried to not make her nervous before, and she took it in very good spirit. But it was definitely it was absolutely plausible that could have happened. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Fungisai, how can we put it in the bigger picture of suppression of opposition and critical voices? Is this part of an overall strategy the government, the regime is pursuing?
We have elections coming this year.
Yeah.
And I think as part of this strategy, a strategy that has proven to work for the regime for years, is suppressing all voices of, all dissenting voices, all opposition political actors, especially the I would say the credible ones. They will make sure that they are stifled, such that they can't even operate. I'll briefly highlight that the Citizens Coalition for Change has had more than 52 of its rallies banned, meaning that they cannot campaign. The delimitation report that has been developed by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission itself has some bizarre boundaries and does not even make sense in terms of how there is no method in it. And attempts to challenge the report at the Constitutional Court has not succeeded, but there are still attempts again to do so. And hopefully we might get something, but that still doesn't help. The opposition has been denied the voters' roll, and you are going into an election. Mm-hmm. And one of the leaders of the opposition has been in prison for more than 300 days, being denied bail. And so this is the environment that we are in. And I do not see the government stopping this, as it is under pressure for, to win the elections. I actually see a lot more happening, a lot of fear also amongst the political activists. And I also feel that even Nelson Chamisa himself, he's really scared. You can even see that he's only willing or able to do so much, but the fear is also in him as well. So this is how the regime has succeeded in stifling the freedoms of the people, their will, their ability to choose their own leaders. For us, I think it's something that is far-fetched. So elections are coming, and I think ZANU-PF is going to win again, which means CARE International will have more work to do, because it means from that 50%, expect the number to keep growing and growing again. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, you only hope that elections will happen, right? Because Barbara, you said it had been postponed already, right? It was...
No, not quite. It was just that last year we assumed that the elections were going to be happening much earlier. And that looks like, sort of more like August, which is legally speaking as late as it can be done.
Referring to this fear, this idea of fear entering the national psyche. Yeah, I mean, Barbara, we talked about sort of state terrorism, because each and everyone must be prepared to be arrested, to be put away. You can be VIP, you can be a worker. I mean, this is part of the regime's way to establish power, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the way that I always explain it is that they're not North Korea. They would like to be, but they're not. So they can't control everybody all the time. So what they rely on is they rely on creating fear and self-censorship in people in order to toe the line, because they don't have the resources to do it. And the way they do it is that on the one hand, you have very prominent people like Tsitsi Dambarengwa or Job Sikala that Fungisai referred to, the man who's now been in prison for over 300 days, effectively without trial, detention without trial. So it's that they tell people, look, if we can do this to people like this, just imagine what we can do to you. Yes. And on the other hand, they also create enough fear by just taking out, almost arbitrary people. And the next thing you see is they're in leg irons and a magistrate's court, and everybody thinks, here, but for the grace of God, go I. Because it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think that this could have been me, and it is that's part of the strategy, instilling this kind of fear, insecurity, and arbitrariness that allows the regime to carry on. And if I may sort of digress here slightly, but it belongs to this, is that the trading partners, the biggest trading partners become China. But China just wants things to sort of stay quiet, and China's big strategic aim here is Zimbabwe, somewhat surprisingly, to the military regime, sits on enormous amounts of lithium, which you need for the famous lithium-ion batteries. If you want to get the energy transition and the electrical vehicles going, this is what you need. And what the Chinese are quite clearly busy with is they want to sit on the entire supply chain, from getting the lithium out of the ground to manufacturing the batteries and putting them into cars. This is not a level playing field that Fungisai is describing, where you have a very credible and in many places very competent opposition party that could take power in anything that looks like a fair contest. Yeah. I mean, this party, the CCC, Citizens Coalition for Change, is reigned against this very oppressive military regime, backed up by a superpower that has enormous military and financial and economic interests in that things don't change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got it. Thank you very much, Barbara. Chikonde, talking about economy, I know empowerment, economic empowerment, financial literacy, especially for women and girls, is a cornerstone in your work too. Yeah, let's give us some hope, please. What are you investing in terms of economy and empowerment? Not only women, but rural communities. How is it? Microfinancing. Give us an idea, please.
Right. So as CARE, we are working on financial inclusion, and we are particularly working on village savings and loans model that then, women are able to boost businesses, have entrepreneurial skills, train on financial literacy, but also have a level playing field to be able to access microfinance from microfinance institutions for formal loans just to expand their businesses. So that is one approach that we are working on under our Women's Economic Justice Front. But also we are working on, in response to some work on climate change, on the green economy, to see how women's skills can be built in terms of being part of the care economy, having them installing solar panels. It has been said by Fungusai of the electricity challenge that is in Zimbabwe, and that is one way of addressing it, but also trying to bolster the incomes of women. As we are talking of women and girls, it does not mean we are leaving out the men, but then, studies have shown that there is that dramatic violence, disempowerment for women in tense situations like Zimbabwe faces itself in. So with this type of situation, we are really trying to reduce cases of domestic violence through these initiatives, but also trying to see how women can find themselves in a space where they have cohesion, solidarity, and having those conversations to really get themselves out of the situations that might look impossible, but there is always hope. The human species is always finding survival mechanisms. Yeah. And it's exciting that CARE is working on these programs with women, but also trying to have them integrate within the spaces that are there within Zimbabwe.
Yeah, lovely. Are women particularly integrated in the so-called climate resilient livelihoods? What does it mean? What does it mean?
Yes, so I've talked of the green economy where we have the solar entrepreneurial skills, but we also have agriculture-based initiatives where there are several initiatives that are in place trying to control the level of damage that would come when there's drought or when there's flooding, creating a conducive environment in the soil, barriers for flood that might wash away or crop, diversifying, but also planting more drought resistant, but also trying to increase local varieties that the communities could then use to really adapt into the changing climate. Those are just a few of the examples that we're working with.
Yeah, but it's really exciting. And the list, I recommend to those of you interested in CARE's work, please visit CARE's page Zimbabwe, and you will be impressed by the amount and the scope of projects being rolled out. So I bet, Chikondi, you never are bored with this amount of work and projects in place. So good luck to that. For those of you interested in giving us more comments and questions, please go ahead. Time is flying. There's only 50 minutes left. So go ahead, and I grabbed the question that came in and I give it to Fungisai. Monica was wondering, is there any activity of political education or training or research done by the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation with partners in Zimbabwe? Fungisai, are there cooperations in terms of research and education?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, we do have work, and my understanding of political work does not necessarily mean working with a political party itself, but working with all the actors, especially the civil society, that can better drive, all the values that can give meaning to the politics of the country. So as such, we work so much with the journalists in Zimbabwe, and we do so much research on areas such as media freedom in Zimbabwe, all in an effort to strengthen that sector, as we believe that it is the fourth estate and it is a source of power and of influence in the whole democratic journey that the country has been grappling with for years. So yes, we do. And we do also work with the organizations such as the Legal Resources Foundation in Zimbabwe, an organization that seeks to promote human rights and access to justice, especially for the marginalized and the very poor communities in the country. We also conduct research also in that area. But also we do conduct research that also has an international feel into it. For example, we recently conducted a research on the Chinese use of surveillance technologies in Zimbabwe, all in an effort to understand how this impacts on the politics of the country itself, or on the democratic, agenda of the country itself. And it was shocking, but expected that this could be happening. And we established that, yes, there was a strong hand there that was there to tamper with the people's privacy, people's freedoms for the benefit of the ruling regime. So that's the kind of work that we also do. We also work strongly on the issues of the economy through the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce as well, where we do research. Every year we have a survey that is launched by the president, which speaks to the state of industry in the country. So it just gives you a picture of what is happening in the country. And it is our contribution to making sure that those that have the power can relook at our situation and hopefully listen to the voices of business and make Zimbabwe a better place. So those are some of the activities that we do in the country. I don't know, Barbara, if I've left anything else there.
Maybe just one thing, and for Monica's benefit, Zimbabwe has a piece of legislation which is called the Prohibition of Political Yada Yada Fish Cake Act. And effectively, if Fungisai and I were to engage in the kind of civic education, political education that I think Monica is first and foremost directly thinking in, we would actually go either to jail or be fined or both. So it is effectively illegal.
Okay, thank you. But Barbara, can we touch a topic I know you're passionate about, and which is especially interesting because it has a binational dimension, South Africa and Zimbabwe. We're talking about labor rights, and we're talking about the Zimbabwean Extension Permit, the ZEP, which is currently discussed at High Court in Pretoria. Can you give us an idea of how this legislation, this bill, will have, if it passed, will have a dire impact on Zimbabwean economy?
So what it is that again, and you quoted a figure of 16 million Zimbabweans. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is there are upwards, there are several million Zimbabweans out of this very small population who are actually living in neighboring countries, and a lot of them in South Africa. So when the regime last time completely lost its rag, and because they were losing the elections around 2007, they went after people. There was hyperinflation, which made Germany's hyperinflation of 1923 look like a picnic. Yeah. Literally a million or so Zimbabweans came over the border. The South African immigration authorities were not coping. So they issued a blanket, what was called a Zimbabwean exemption permits, to everybody who was Zimbabwean, basically saying, just get on with it, but don't clog our systems. And this has now been, 14, 15, 16 years ago. And there's been increasing xenophobia and violence against non-South Africans in South Africa. And Zimbabweans are at the forefront of this, in part because they tend to be quite visible in the sense that they are, there are larger numbers of them. And so in a political move, the Minister of Home Affairs, which is the in minister, went ahead and said, no, he's going to cancel this program without consultation, without anything else. So there's been a number of organizations that have now gone to court, which have said, well, we can't tell a government what to do, but we can tell a government to adhere to due process. Mm-hmm. And that is part of the fight that is being fought at the moment. To give you an idea of the number of people involved. So Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean exemption permits were issued to just under 200,000 people. Now, on average, there'll be 4 to 5 people attached to every person who is on one of these exemption permits. So you're basically looking at 1 million people, a lot of them children who are at school, who at the stroke of midnight on the 1st of July would no longer be able to go to school or access health care. People wouldn't be able to run bank accounts anymore. There are lots of people who have started businesses employing South Africans, may I add. So this is a very, very cynical political move on the part of an ANC government minister trying to shore up domestic support and to distract from his own failings.
Yeah, and this bill, if it will pass, will have a deep impact on Zimbabwean economy. Fungi, we're talking about remittances, the money people who are working abroad are sending home. Can you give us an idea of the scope of the ripple effect of this bill?
And in the region that is likely to be affected even more is the region of Matabeleland. It's a region that has been marginalized. It is disregarded. And as such, that is why you find most Zimbabweans being in South Africa, not only just because of the language, it's easy there if you're coming from Matabeleland, but also it was just a home for those that felt they were rejected by the country itself, because it never put the people of Matabeleland as a priority. As such, you'll find that many families in Matabeleland rely on their relatives in the diaspora just for basic survival. And this is going to come to an end on the 30th of June. And you can imagine you spoke of 50,000, sorry, 50% of Zimbabweans who actually are in extreme poverty. And that number is now going to increase because all those that have been cushioned by those in South Africa and in other countries, I think also are going to feel the pinch. And with this, if they do come back, if the Zimbabweans do come back here, I'm sorry, there's nothing to do here. And again, it will increase it will actually increase the number again of the people that are in need. Well, I really don't think they will come, but if they do come back, then that's going to be another reality there. So really, for me, it's a stroke, on the back of many Zimbabweans who are already desperate. And this happening now at a very critical juncture again, where, as you have already highlighted, that we have the climate change. Matabeleland region is the driest part of Zimbabwe. And already, what will they do? How will they feed themselves? So the issue of food insecurity that we're talking about here, it's actually going to become even more important to address going forward.
Yeah, Fungi-san, thank you very much. Chikondi, are you as an organization, as CARE, is the decision in South Africa, are you preparing for this? Do you have to prepare for this? Or, I mean, the funds are already limited, so you have to say, no, thank you. We are already out of control, not out of control, but we have already reached our limits. Or are you already establishing kind of additional helping program for those who most likely will come back from South Africa?
So I think also coming in like with the regional angle, bodies like the Southern Africa Development Corporation, SADC, should come in to, provide that platform and provide alternatives for whatever the issue is driving the government of South Africa to this. So there is need to come to a rapport and ensure that the existing inequalities are not further deepened. we are in a situation where we're all coming from a COVID crisis. We have all this climatic crisis. We have this economic crisis.
Yeah.
And we cannot have more of our population in dire need. So I would say, I think this is also an opportunity for governments, these two governments, to have that bilateral discussion, to open up for more of this conversation that have solutions, but also ensuring that there is independence in media, so that some of these issues, when they are highlighted, you're able to have the necessary attention, the necessary funding that could come to address some of these issues. And if possible, even invest in citizen journalism to have that solidarity. Blocks like the SADC should come into the aid and assist, because this is not left to just one country. This is Africa, and this is our land, this is our continent. These borders were created, yes, but we need to hold each other in times like this and see a way forward. Having laws like this in place, having these instruments to block people, I think is tantamount to abuse of human rights, and we don't want that to actually be an issue of Southern Africa. This has been seen as a stable region. We have pockets of instability here and there, but let it not this blow out of proportion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, Ikondi. It's almost finishing words, very beautiful, very passionate. So we take it as the start of our finishing thoughts in our discussion. Thank you very much, Ikondi. Barbara, your finishing words. A minute. What would you like to add when it comes to Zimbabwe and hope for Zimbabwe?
I think my hope for Zimbabwe, because it's really the extraordinary people and it's an extraordinary country, but my hope for Zimbabwe is that there will be a political change, which then would reduce CARES. It would not do away with CARES work in Zimbabwe, but it would make it, there would be less need. So I think political change is what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Barbara. Fungisai, I bet you are very much in line with Barbara's words, right?
Yeah, because from where I am at the moment, I'm in a situation where I feel that there is no hope for anything to happen here. Everybody in Zimbabwe is looking for an opportunity to leave the country and go and settle elsewhere, because home is no longer home for many. And I think, and the problem is a political one. It needs a political solution. Efforts have been made to try and reform the existing government from within, but that has not worked. There is need for us to try new hands as well, to see if we still remain in the same quagmire that we are in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fungisai. So this is the finishing of our discussion. Thank you very much for being with us on this special day. It is Independence Day in Zimbabwe, but we heard you don't feel like celebration. So let us wish that in the future there will be Independence Days, the 18th of April, where you really feel that celebration is due and should be there. So this is our hope for Zimbabwe tonight. Thank you very much, Fungisai, Chikondi, and Barbara, for being with us, for just giving us an idea of what is going on in Zimbabwe. And for those of you in the audience, thank you very much for being with us, for being interested, for giving us your questions and comments. And if you would like to follow our series, Breaking the Silence, May 2nd will be the next opportunity to join us. We're going to cover Malawi. But tonight is Zimbabwe night. So thank you very much for being with us. Please stay safe and talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Good night.